unexpected leader. Maybe you remember a time when that described you. Maybe that is you today. Whether you're a leader, want to be a leader, or are thinking about the succession planning for leaders in your organization, I promise you that right now you are in the right place. Pull up your chair, get your pen, and get ready to discover how you can become the leader that you were born to be. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, you could listen live to future episodes on your favorite social channel. You can get all information about all future live episodes and therefore interact with us and see these episodes sooner by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And speaking of that website, remarkablepodcast.com, you can see all of the past episodes there, lots of other information. And if you are listening and have already found us, that's great. The podcast site will allow you the opportunity to see episodes if you would prefer that medium. It also gives you lots of other information, including all of the resources that get mentioned during the course of these episodes. I hope you'll take advantage of that. And now I'm going to introduce my guest as promised. Give me just 1 second, and I will introduce to you Miss Jacqueline M Baker. There she is. She is our guest today, and let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we will dive in. Jacqueline founded Scarlet Communications, a global leadership consultancy, in 2012. With thousands of students, Fortune 500s, and community organizations across the globe, she makes a meaningful impact with a modern, relatable, and digestible approach to leadership content creation and delivery. Prior to launching Scarlet, she spent nearly a decade serving in corporate leadership roles, supporting companies like AT&T, Chrysler, Ford Motor Company, and AAA of Michigan. Her most recent corporate role as VP of Startup Programming at AARP Innovation Labs provided her a unique opportunity to discover disruptive startups around the globe and discover ways to help them as well. She aided in their leadership development, among many other things. She has a BA in Public Relations and an MS in Instructional Technology from Wayne State University in the great state of Michigan. She has a Green Belt certification in process improvement. She is the host of Just Start: From Ideas to Action. That's the name of her podcast. And she's been featured in media, including Essence Magazine, Medium, Ambassador Magazine, and also on NBC, CBS, and Detroit Public Television. Today, we're going to talk about her newest book, just come out as we're having this conversation, The Unexpected Leader, Discovering the Leader Within You. Jacqueline, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for reminding me of the past 20 plus years of my life. That was great to hear. So thank you.
Hey, it's your bio, not
It
mine.
is my bio.
It's your story. Listen, we got people here from Nigeria and Egypt and Ontario and Michigan, and Dwayne, who's watching from the Newark airport. So we'll put Dwayne up there because he's watching from the airport. So I've been there. I don't think I've ever watched a podcast from an airport. So anyway, Jacqueline, since you said that bio reminded you of the last 20 years, I'd like to start there, actually. Tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously, I've just recounted the steps, right? But tell us a little bit about the journey. What leads you to doing this kind of work?
That is a great question. For as long as I can remember, Kevin, I have really identified with being a starter. When people ask, like, what was your dream job? I can't really say that I ever was someone that was just like, I want to do this. I found myself being someone who liked to solve, who liked to connect, who liked to innovate, and who liked to start. And if I can just redirect my energy or my focus back to one of the most pivotal starting moments in my life, it is when I gave myself permission to start my first company. My first company in Detroit, Michigan was a wedding and event production business that I ran for 8 years. And that business actually planted the seed for me to then launch what is now Scarlet, because I fell in love with etiquette and protocol and order. But the journey for me has always been one that's rooted in action. It's rooted in starting. It's rooting in giving other people the tools, resources, and storytelling in many cases to start the things that they want to do as well. And so much of the journey has been rooted in that. But I'll say another key part of the journey that I think is applicable to every listener here, despite where you're formally sitting at right now, is that I strongly believe in staying curious. Just about every opportunity that I've had, Kevin, has come across in a way that was a little magical, in that it was just me being willing to have the conversation. Right? Even an opportunity is just like someone may say, "Hey, I think you would be good for this role. I think that I would love to talk to you or explore this with you." And instead of me saying, "Nope, I don't qualify for that," or "No, that is something I've never done before," I am willing to have the conversation and to see where it leads. And so much of my journey is rooted in starting, and it's also rooted in curiosity.
I love that. And now I'm going to ask you a question that I know from reading your book that you appreciate on another podcast. So, is your journey would you attribute more of your journey to luck or hard work?
Look at you with the how I built this conversation and question there. It
just shows you I read the book.
I am very grateful. I am very, very grateful. And you are actually very special in the book reading journey, because I know you have that advanced copy there. Like lots of people didn't get an advanced copy. Exactly. You see that, everybody? That is an advanced copy before it actually hit the streets. My journey has been rooted cleanly in both. Kevin asked the question, is your journey attributed to luck or to hard work? And it has truly been both. But I don't think that the luck happens unless some work is put in. I firmly believe that so many of our questions on the leadership journey that we're on, the things that we want to start and do with our life, so many of our questions get answered in the action. And so it's impossible for this magic that everybody wants to happen if you don't do some work. If you don't, there is no magic to, exponentialize if you don't actually do some work. And so I think that my journey has firmly been rooted in both, Kevin.
I love that. So that question was mostly for Jacqueline and I, but hopefully you got value out of it as well. So the new book is called The Unexpected Leader. So we're going to talk about the book, but like, what do you mean? Just very quickly, like, what do you mean by the unexpected leader?
So many times we have the skills, the know-how, and even the resources to do what it is that we need or want to do, and we don't realize it. My goal for this book was to make sure that people saw their leadership potential by revisiting periods of their life, by hearing stories from other people, so that it can spark that reminder of, wait a minute, I am unexpectedly ready to do this. I am unexpectedly ready to start using my voice. I am unexpectedly ready to start seeing myself as a leader. I just needed to be reminded of that. There's so many things that you and I do all the time, Kevin, and your listeners do all the time, from raising kids and delegating tasks out, right, to having that annual golf outing with friends where we are delegating things out and we are being democratic about our leadership style. And we leave all of those leadership characteristics at the door when we approach a professional situation. And my job and my goal and my desire was to remind people of what they're capable of, sometimes in the most unexpected way.
Yeah, I like to think about that as looking at your world through the lens of leadership. So like, what do I already know about this, even if I've never had the job of leader, sort of what I talked about when we opened the show. So one of the things to that very point, one of the things that you talk about early in the book that I really like is you talk about there are 4 levels of leadership. And so why don't you unpack, because it ties directly to what you just said, unpack that for us a little bit.
My desire is for readers and viewers and listeners to see themselves as a leader by making the leadership journey and making their leadership opportunities accessible. And the best way to make something accessible is to put a visual or even a mental something in someone's mind that helps them to see, oh, I can fit right there. So for us in the Scarlet world and the work that I do every day, we introduce leadership in levels. There are 4 different levels, as you just shared. There's self-leadership, there's the leadership of others, there's the leadership of communities, and there's the leadership of movements. And if you think about that description real fast, I want everyone to really zone in on the fact that I didn't say anything specific to a role, a position, status, a title, even a company, because there are some people who formally don't work in a workplace who are dynamic leaders, people who've never had corporate jobs who are dynamic leaders.
Right.
But at that core, Kevin, the most important part of that leadership wheel, those leadership levels, is self. Because think about it, Kevin, you've had a great career. There have been times when you or I and lots of other people listening have been tapped to lead other people, right? To lead an initiative. And in that moment, you're just like, probably like, yay. And then you realize like, ooh, like this is sort of heavy. And maybe you at some point didn't focus as much on self-leadership when you could have, because once you start leading other people, so much of your energy gets redirected to solving other people's issues, right? Solving other challenges for the organization. So my mandate and my ask to people is to zone in on your self-leadership journey to make sure that you are as strong as, and your foundational journey from a self-leadership perspective is as sound as possible, because it makes it a lot easy to lead other people, to lead communities, and to lead movements if you are solid and firm in the fact that, yes, I am a self-leader. And the other thing too that is so powerful about self-leadership is that you don't need permission. I know so many times we're at workplaces or even running a household and we're thinking someone's going to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, you're a leader. I'm going to come get a certification and say you're a leader. And that's your job. Like it is your job to wake up and say, I'm a leader and I'm going to commit every day to finding the tools, resources, storytellings, quick tips to help myself become a better leader so that when I get a chance to lead other people, kids, workplace, whatever, it's a little bit easier. And so that's how we look at leadership. That is how we teach leadership. That is how I want people to see themselves as a leader. And I want them to give themselves permission to do so.
Yeah, I love that. We had a comment come in from LinkedIn, and I really think you already did this. I think the question came in as you were doing this, but anything else you want to say in terms of summarizing the book in a few sentences? Again, I think you did it, but anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I view the book as a resource and a guide for you to see yourself as a leader despite your role, position, status, or title. And I also view it as an opportunity for you to unexpectedly and many times discover all these leadership qualities that are already within you so that you can give yourself permission to get better and better and better. The other thing too I'll say about the book and just about my life in general, because we didn't discuss this, it is not by accident, Kevin, that I am the owner of 2 trademarks. Both of them are Just Start in 2 different categories. For those of you who are in the patent and trademark world, you understand that a little bit. It's not by accident that I am the proprietor of these trademarks. And the reason why is because once we start to give ourselves permission to be a leader, then we start to give ourselves permission to do other things, to start that business you've been thinking of, to speak up for yourself at work, to push back when something doesn't make sense. And so it is this opportunity for you to see yourself sometimes bigger than what you truly are, or to remember that, hey, I'm good. Like I'm qualified. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm saying. I just need to give myself permission to do so. And the book is your reminder to do all that.
The other thing, a lot of times when people use the phrase or say, give yourself permission, they don't continue with what you said after,
Right.
which is problematic. What you said after is give yourself permission to try and to get better.
Yes.
So often I think that phrase is used to simply say, well, okay, here I am, world. And you're not saying that at all in what you've said, nor in the book. So one of the things that you talk about in the book, and you're not the first to do this, is to talk about leadership styles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to dive into the 9 styles that you list or the 63 styles that other people might use, but rather to talk about your take on styles and how they're helpful or not. What is your take on leadership styles?
My take on leadership styles is that we usually gravitate towards 1 or 2 styles naturally by default. And I think by default as humans, we naturally gravitate organically towards lots of things, right? I say all the time as an example that, hey, I'm Jacqueline M Baker and I am a catastrophizer. What that means is that I know that although I am outwardly positive, I'm always going to help people try and get to their next level, all those things. If I get an unexpected phone call, Kevin, Jacqueline's mind is automatically going to go to the worst. It is how I am wired. It is because of how I was raised as a child. That is my default, right? But you know what I have to give myself permission to do is to catch myself and say, oh, wait, in this scenario, this doesn't serve me. Like this doesn't work. This doesn't get me to where I need to be. And I caught myself and I'm moving on. I implore people to do the same thing as it relates to leadership styles, meaning that there is going to be a style, whether it is democratic, autocratic, laissez-faire, servant, transformational. We're all going to usually gravitate towards one style. Lots of people, as you probably know, Kevin, they say, I'm a servant leader. I'm a democratic leader. Like lots of people say that sometimes because it feels good, but that doesn't always serve the outcome that you want, right? And sometimes we actually need to embrace and consider styles that perhaps we did not realize we need in that moment. Like, for example, the last couple of years, you and I know has been tough. It's been challenging. We've been trying to figure stuff out. The world's been changing. And a lot of times we frown upon like autocratic leadership styles that are just like, do this, go here, like that feel a little bit more dictatorship. Over the past couple of years, we've wanted a little bit more of an autocratic leader at our helms. Someone that is going to say, it's a tragedy. There's chaos outside. Let's do this. Like, here's the best direction. Now, of course, sometimes you want to get people's input, but when the world is burning down and things are going left and there is a tragedy,
we need to know where the fire escape is.
Right. I want to know. And you want somebody who's an autocratic leader that'll say, hey, here's the plan. Here's where we're going. And so bottom line here is, from a leadership style, what I really encourage people to do is, number one, know what your default leadership style is. And there are tons of different personality assessments that'll help you figure that out. But be willing to flex, right? Be willing to flex. And when I say be willing to flex, be willing to embrace this notion of situational leadership, that there are going to be tons of different situations that happen in our life, and our ability to really adopt other styles and implement those will help us to get to where we need to be faster.
Taking us back to what we were talking about self-leadership first, Linda on LinkedIn, Linda on LinkedIn asks, does self-leadership automatically translate to being able to lead others?
I do not think so. I think that here's a couple things I have to say about that. I believe mostly that leadership is learned versus leadership being something that people are just naturally always born with. All right. Leadership can be taught. Now, that's not to say that because someone is a self-leader and a self-leader only, that they can't potentially lead other people. But I think I want you to rewind back to what we were talking about just a moment ago, and what Kevin did a spotlight on is the ability to say, yes, I am a self-leader, and to also give yourself permission to elevate and learn some more, right? Let's just brass tacks this. Leading other people is hard. Kevin, you know it. I know it. Lots of people in the chat know it. It is hard. It is more than just, I am the boss, do as I say. You have to take on some types, you have to have a high degree of emotional intelligence. You have to be able to delegate. Like, it's not just like, I can lead other people and let me go for it. You really need some skills along the way. But the best way to get there, to really start to embrace those skills and get better at it, is to first see yourself as a leader of yourself, a leader like initially as baseline, and then you can add on things on top of that. I think to this, as you made this statement a couple of moments ago, Kevin, I really wanted to jump in and add something, and now is the perfect opportunity to do so. I know that we are in a period of our lives where people use the term most authentic self a lot. And Kevin, I don't know how you feel about it. We haven't even went there or talked about it, but I have a love-loathe relationship with most authentic self. It's not that I don't believe that we should search inward and find out organically who we are and how we respond to things. I think that sometimes, though, that term and that approach gets us into trouble, right? Because I do believe there's a default to me, right? There's a default to you, Kevin, but I do believe that there are things that I don't know. 16-year-old Jacqueline, 26-year-old Jacqueline, 36-year-old Jacqueline is not the Jacqueline that I am today. And more importantly, I have the capacity, and we all have the capacity, to learn a bit more. So most authentic self, yes, there is a way that I approach things and naturally a way that I respond to things. But there's some more learning that I have to do that might get me closer to maybe that dream that I want. Things that maybe I don't think I would have been willing to embrace in my most authentic self. And so I apply that same thinking in leadership. Like, yes, I am a self-leader, but if I give myself permission to learn a little bit more, I can lead others. Doors open for me. And so bottom line here is be willing to expand, grow, learn, and give yourself permission to elevate.
So following on all of that, how do we know, especially for those who haven't had the role yet, right?
Yeah.
How do I know when I'm ready? Because there's some other stuff that's showing up in the chat that I think is connected to this idea of how do I know when I'm ready based on what you just said?
That's a fantastic question. I think that one of the most underrated things that often we have at our fingertips is the ability to ask for and implement feedback, right? To ask people around us, to ask maybe even our superiors, how am I performing in this area? How do you think I did in this area? And the reason why feedback is hard is because naturally we want to hear what we want to hear. We want someone to tell us, yeah, Kevin, you're fantastic. You're amazing, right? You're
Well,
great.
and even if we know we've got challenges, we want to hear about those,
We
not
do.
about a surprise, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so feedback is one of those huge ways to determine, like, okay, am I seeing, or am I actually, the output of what I'm doing, is that what I actually think about myself? Do I think that I'm performing the way that I think? The other thing that I think is a huge way for you to determine, am I ready? Am I capable? Am I ready to take on the responsibility of potentially leading other people? Is by getting started. And when I say getting started, I mean relinquish yourself of this thought process that it is going to be perfect, right? That all of it, oh, I'm never going to make a mistake and people are never going to not be angry or mad with me. And I know that puts people in a little bit of a spin of discomfort, because it's just like, what do you mean I'm going to make some mistakes? Of course you're going to make some mistakes along the way. Like, none of us are perfect.
If you don't think you're going to make them, you're not ready.
You're not ready. Like, you're absolutely not ready. And so it is that feedback component. It is also like just dipping your toe in and recognizing that so many of your questions will get answered in the action, right? But it is also, as a third, giving yourself permission to observe other leaders and seeing what about their successful leadership journey, hopefully a successful one if you're observing them and you look up to them, might you be able to incorporate into your journey to achieve success a bit faster from a leadership component. And so I would say those three things are ways for you to get started. I'm hoping that if you are in a position or in a role or at an organization, that there are some type of tools or learnings that are being offered to help you get there. And let me bust that one open just for a second. Kevin, you and I probably think that it's amazing, or I'll say I think that it's amazing. Hopefully you do too. That we work at jobs and have access to all these trainings and certifications and learnings that often we never use. Like, for those of you listening, when's the last time you accessed your learning management system with all these tools, negotiation, communication, all these things, and we don't realize, like, oh, I am not paying attention to these tools that'll help me be a better leader and maybe even lead people at other levels. And so just utilizing the resources that are around you are incredibly important as well.
Let me just make an additional comment about that word ready. Like, if you look back on your career, wherever you are in your career, like, what does ready even mean to you?
What do you mean?
You never took a job that you knew everything about because you didn't want that job.
Right.
So we're always taking a leap or a dipping of the toe, to you, Jacqueline, to use your words. And so I think we need to be aware of that too. I love that. We could have a whole conversation about mistakes, and I know that we could, based on another one of your books, but we don't have time for that today. You mentioned something earlier. I want to go back to it. Like, what's a lesson that you've learned, and or maybe it's connected, for others of us as leaders, that we can take from what I'll say the pandemic and beyond, like since March of 2020, because we don't even know when people are going to all watch or listen to this necessarily, right? Hopefully far into the future. The question that I have is, like, what's a lesson that we can take?
It's a lesson that I believe lots of companies that we were enamored with, lots of companies that we spent our dollars at, lots of companies that we spent a lot of time at over the past 2, 3, maybe 4 decades for many of us, wishes that they would have embraced. And it should be a continuous lesson for how we live our lives, that the way that we previously did things doesn't always solve the challenges of today or for tomorrow. Many of us shopped at Sears. Many of us shopped at Blockbuster. Many of us shopped at Radio Shack. Many of us had things from organizations that we greatly admired, and innovation got the best of them, right? Sometimes ego got the best of them. And sometimes trying to apply the solutions for last decade's challenges or last decade's customer needs don't matter now because that's not the customer of today. I know that so many organizations try to, lead with the iron fist, like, do this, come here, like, do this right now. And for lots of companies, that did not work. And it did not work because a lot of people started to recognize their demise. And I don't mean to be doomsdayish, but a lot of people started to recognize, like, hey, I might not be here, or the things that I care about are much more important than being in 6 hours of traffic. And so companies need to rethink, like, wait a minute, how do I handle this? And so I think for organizations and even for individuals, being open to being an expansive leader. And when I say expansive leader, thinking large, thinking, how might I? How could we? Instead of a minimalistic leader or minimalistic in our thinking, where it's just like, we can't, we don't, we won't, we're never going to do that. We have to give ourselves permission to think expansively. And the thing too, Kevin, you know this, at some point, we're going to have to narrow things down, right? At some point, what about the resources? What about the time? But when in those moments, we can give ourselves permission to say, like, how can we do this? Like, what are the options? Let's throw the spaghetti on the wall. Let's brainstorm it all instead of always saying, I can't, I won't, I shouldn't. We're never going to do that. I think organizations and individuals did lean into that a bit more over the past couple of years because we had to. Yeah. But I would love to see companies and individuals continue to do that. Like, how might we? How could we? Not we can't, we won't, and we shouldn't all the time.
Yeah. What we've always done before definitely changed. So yeah, we should have more to look at even from that perspective.
Right.
Couple more questions for you before we finish, as we start to wrap up a little bit here. Before we get to that, what do you do, Jacqueline, for fun?
I love hosting. I'm very lucky in that I married someone that loves to entertain and host just as much as I do. Like, we love having people over. Of course, travel is on the list. I am someone who, as we talked about before, I remain curious and I always want to give myself permission to start new things. And so every year I pick up a new sport. Some of the sports I have continued to do and some I haven't. So I currently—
What's your new sport this year?
It's actually just sprinting and running. And the reason why that is, Kevin, is because I needed something that I could fit into my schedule of launching a book. I needed something that didn't require a whole bunch of learning, but I've done tennis, I've done whitewater rafting, I've fenced before, I've snowboarded, I still snowboard to this day. But it's amazing when you give yourself permission to be a novice, right? To be an amateur. But the things that you get in return, the community, the good health, the good, good physique, are all sort of byproducts of just being in the midst of learning something new. So that's what I do for fun. But I will say the other thing I also love to do for fun is, this is gonna be a little cheesy and sound a little bit self-serving, but I truly do love helping people start. Like, when I can sit with someone and a light bulb goes off of, oh, I'm capable of doing this. Like, I can start this. I don't need permission. Oh, like, it's just internally life-changing for me. So those are all things that I do for fun.
Well, one of the things you didn't mention, and this completely connected, though, to everything we've talked about. As we talked about being curious, we've talked about learning, you talked about learning a new sport every year. One of the ways that we all learn is by reading. And so my question, and it's the only question you knew I was going to ask you. And so the question is, what are you reading now, or what's something you've read recently that people might find interesting? Even if they don't find it interesting, what have you been reading?
Well, I will say that your question is in alignment with, like, a little bit of newness for me. I don't love reading autobiographies. I just never have. I don't know what it is about them. I just don't. There are two things that I've been reading lately that I loved. One of them I've already completed. I read Indra Nooyi's, the former chairwoman for PepsiCo. I read her autobiography, My Life in Full. And Kevin, it was really good. And it was good because, number one, it highlighted, like, the intersection of culture and leadership, and how a lot of times they're so closely intertwined, especially someone who's leading at that level. It was just a really well done, good book. The other book that I'm reading is Say More About That, and Other Ways to Push Back for Yourself, Others, and Advocate, is by Amber Cabral. And the reason why I like that book is because at every juncture of our life, from having kids to trying to get a promotion, to trying to advocate for something that you care about from a human welfare situation, it's all at the intersection of speaking up and advocating for yourself and for others. And so I think that by consuming content like that second book, it just helps us to be a better leader overall. But those are two pieces that I love and I'm currently consuming or reconsuming.
Perfect. And so we'll have all of that, links to those things, as well as Jacqueline's book right here, in the show notes. And you can go find those wherever you're listening to the podcast or by going to remarkablepodcast.com. But there's probably something else we'll put there. And that is for Jacqueline to tell us where we can learn more about you and your work. We'll put those links there as well. Where can we go? Where do you want to point people? Here's your chance.
Absolutely. The easiest way to get the book at whatever platform you'd like to get it at is at JacquelineMBaker.com/unexpected. I know that people like Barnes and Noble. I know that people like independent bookshops. I know that people sometimes like Amazon because of the quickness of it all. But independent of where you like to buy books, because you can get the books anywhere, you can quickly access a link at JacquelineMBaker.com/unexpected.
So you can see, if you're watching on the screen, we have your main website, which also gives people access to your podcast, et cetera, et cetera. But if you put a /unexpected after that, you can get all the information you need about the book. So before we go now, everybody, I have a question for all of you. And it's the question I ask you every single week. And the question is, now what? So you had 32 minutes with Jacqueline. And the question is, what are you going to do with what you learned? What action are you going to take as a result of this? Whether that's buying her book, but more specifically in the shorter term, what action will you take in terms of being more curious, or in terms of thinking about your readiness, or about what you need to be learning or growing in, or thinking about the levels of leadership, or even about leadership styles, whatever that is? What action will you take from the information you've gotten here and turning that into application in your work and life? And so we will leave you with that. And Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. We had a bit of a fit and start before we got here. It was worth the wait. Some of you may have thought you were going to hear us sooner or see us sooner. Didn't happen, but we're here now, and we're glad that we've had the chance to do that. Thanks so much, Jacqueline, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
And everybody, hopefully you found this useful. If so, we're back next week, but you also could share this with someone else. So my hope for you as we close today is that, number one, you take action on what you learned today. And number two, that you share this episode or the podcast in general with someone else. We'll hope that you'll do that. And you can learn more by going to remarkablepodcast.com. And we'll be back next week, as we always are, with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.